Start. Go.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Hall. I'm a conservation policy advocate with Seatuck Environmental Association, and I wanted to talk a little bit today about Endangered Species Day. So I want to give a little overview of kind of why this day is important, the Endangered Species Act, conservation success stories, and then also how Seatuck is working hard every day to protect Long Island wildlife, and especially those threatened wildlife, and how you can too. So the Endangered Species Act was created over 45 years ago, and it really gives value to our nation's natural heritage and the diversity of a lot of value to both the aesthetic, scientific, cultural, logical, recreational, a series of values that recognizes how important the diversity of species is to our nation. It also really raises the concern that if we don't act and if we don't have these policies and regulations in place, a lot of these species could go extinct, which we definitely don't want. So today is really about celebrating those success stories, celebrating the fact that we've been able to protect many species, and also forward and looking at how we can protect a lot of these species in the future. So Long Island has a series of listed species that have a critical habitat on Long Island. So basically listed means they have some status of concern or we're worried about the population. The highest level is endangered, which means it's at most threat of being extinct. Then the next level is threatened, and then the last level after that is species of concern. And again, all of these kind of distinctions basically just say we're really concerned about those populations. So to go over a couple of the species that we have here, one of them is a lot of our nesting shorebirds, and as you can probably tell, these nesting shorebirds are really threatened because of their shoreline habitat is threatened. Whether that's from climate change, like sea level rise, whether that's from human influence, just kind of like being at the beach and not being careful of these nesting shorebirds, or whether that's human development even. So some of these include the least tern, which has a New York State status of threatened, and then a U.S. status of endangered in the interior of the U.S. Another one of those birds, the shorebirds, are the roseate tern, which has a New York State status of endangered and a national status of endangered as well. And sometimes these statuses differ between like the New York State and the rest of the nation is because, there's different population estimates, there's different conditions compared to our regional estimates and our regional understanding of the species and availability of habitat compared to the national one. An additional one is the common tern, which in New York is threatened, and then in the US it is not listed. And then additionally there's the piping plover. So in the New York status that's endangered, and then the national status is threatened. So another one of these species that we have on Long Island that is a species of concern is the northern long-eared bat. The New York status is threatened, and then the national status is also threatened. And these species, the northern long-eared bat and a lot of different bats unfortunately in the US, have really been suffering from a condition called white nose syndrome, and it's basically a fungal disease that can really harm these bats and basically take out large populations. And then additional species we have here is the eastern tiger salamander. So in the New York status they're endangered, and in the US they're not listed. And these species, like some of the salamanders and different types of frogs as well, are a bit more vulnerable because a lot of them use vernal ponds in the spring to breed. So vernal ponds are basically the seasonal temporal ponds that only come about in the early spring, where different depressions in the landscape fill up with water and basically create these little nurseries or living environments for these species. And these can be really at risk, whether from different road influences, if they're by roads, whether it's people filling in those depressions, things like that. tell a lot of these species kind of get to the level of being endangered, threatened, or species of concern from whether that's habitat destruction, basically caused from humans, or basic climate change, whether it's disease like the white nose syndrome, or also loss of genetic variation. So this basically means that the population has lost its diversity of genes within the population, and in order for a population to be really healthy, it has to have a diversity of genes within the population, making it more resilient to change. This can happen naturally where populations lose genetic variation, or also it can be human influence. So if humans overhunt or overfish a species to where the population is just really dwindled. So these are a couple species I mentioned that are on Long Island, but we have a great list of all of New York State and the different species, plants, animals, insects, etc. that are threatened or endangered. You can check out New York DC's website for more of that information. But we also want to talk about some of the conservation success stories we've had on Long Island and in the local area. So for instance, the Endangered Species Act and some of those conservation efforts and policies have really brought back or enhanced the population of some of our charismatic bird species. So these include ospreys and bald eagles and peregrine falcons. We think actually there's about a dozen bald eagles now nesting on Long Island. We also have found that in the New York City metro area, there's about 25 nesting pairs of Peregrine Falcons, which is one of the densest populations in the globe then, which is really exciting. And a lot of the reasons why some of these big charismatic birds are coming back is because on the ban of DDT years ago. And you might know DDT and kind of the chemical influence of that mosquito spray from Rachel Carson's famous book Silent Spring. But what you may not know is that a lot of these efforts to ban DDT and the campaign to ban DDT started actually right here on Long Island. So a group of local scientists and avid birders got together and basically really wanted to push this effort forward. These local scientists and avid birders actually also eventually became a great environmental conservation organization called the Environmental Defense Fund, which works on preserving our natural resources and wildlife across the globe. So I definitely give them a check out. Additionally, you should check out our policy program coordinators, Ariel Santos, her amazing video on piping plovers. We talked about how they were endangered as a nesting shorebird, but there has been a lot of conservation success there as well. So the piping plover is actually in the Atlantic coast population from Canada to North Carolina, has a record number of breeding pairs in the 2019 season. 2,000 breeding pairs they recorded in the 2019 season. That's up from about 1,900 pairs in 2018. And this number has climbed tremendously from the 790 pairs that were seen 35 years ago when it was first protected by the Endangered Species Act. So you can really see the value that these policies can have when they're put in place. Also, Long Island has been abuzz the last few years with new humpback whale sightings. And the recovery of this large charismatic mammal is also made possible through the Endangered Species Act. It has brought a real boom to our local Long Island through, just students learning about it, also kind of the natural tourism sector as well. So you can see the Endangered Species Act and these conservation efforts really help bring around a lot of these threatened and vulnerable species. And there's a great group of organizations, whether federal government, local government, organizations, state government, that are working together to try and bring back some of these vulnerable species. And Seatuck is definitely one of those. We definitely pride ourselves in trying to protect Long Island's wildlife every day. Verna Ponds, which is really exciting. So we're looking at these Verna Ponds and understanding things like the eastern tiger salamander and how they're doing in there. Another thing Seatuck...
Wait, go.
We do our citizen science efforts. So basically Seatuck looks for citizen scientists across the island, volunteers just like you, that basically can go out to their neighborhood or local backyard and try to see where these different species are. And it really helps us get an idea of the distribution of different species, because that's kind of the first step in conservation, is to understand where the species are and then how we can protect them. So for instance, one of the surveys that we have kind of coming to a close is the river herring survey, where a bunch of great volunteers went across the island to their local streams and help us understand better these migratory fish populations. An interesting note on river herring, they're not actually a listed species. However, the population has really dropped from its historic numbers due to different things like commercial fishing and freshwater habitat degradation through dams or undersized culverts or things like that. And there's a lot of effort right now in getting them listed. So we'll attach a link to about that kind of story. Additionally, we have we have some great efforts coming up, which include, are we good? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, our connection's a little slow here. I was going to say we have some great citizen science efforts coming up, for instance, the Diamondback Terrapin Watch and also BatMap Long Island. So these are a couple species that really rely on some of Long Island's habitats and coastal environmental climate. So keep an eye out for Seatuck. Go to seatuck.org to check out some of those citizen science efforts, and keep an eye out because we're going to have some trainings coming up on those as well. So basically, what can you do for Endangered Species Day and how can you contribute? You know, the one thing is you can definitely get involved. So whether that's from, you know, being a part of one of our citizen science efforts, or just being mindful and respectful of a lot of Long Island's wildlife, you know, especially for the nesting shorebirds. Remember to just kind of keep your distance from those critical animals and, you know, what they're doing on the beach. Also, it's really important to remind our local lawmakers of the Endangered Species Act and how important it is. You can check out, also we'll put a link in the comment section of a letter Seatuck wrote when there were some proposed changes to the Endangered Species Act, so check that out as well. So yeah, thank you for listening. If you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free to shoot them over in the comment section, and we'll be happy to talk more about this issue. Thank you for joining us today.